Dawn, in the forest, working 16-hour days. You're standing in 3 feet of snow with an axe in your hands. The tree in front of you weighs 5 tons. Your partner's on the other side, swinging in rhythm. One mistake and you're dead. This was the lumberjack. In 1906, there were 500,000 of them in America alone. Men who ate 7,000 calories a day just to survive the work. Men who lived in camps so filthy they'd rather go to jail. Then the chainsaw arrived. Today, fewer than 80,000 remain. This is the story of what happened to the lumberjack, the men who built America one tree at a time, and why they vanished. Over the next 10 minutes, you're going to discover what it was really like to be a lumberjack in 1900, why half the men in Canada were chopping down trees, the invention that changed everything in 1950, and how a job that employed 500,000 people became one of the rarest professions in America. But here's the twist. Lumberjacks didn't disappear because the trees ran out. They disappeared because of one machine, and it took 40 years to work. Let's start with what they actually did. The lumberjack. The word first appeared in 1831 in a letter to a Canadian newspaper describing them as an incorrigible, though perhaps useful, race of mortals. That about sums it up. During the 1800s, timber was one of the most valuable resources in North America. White pine especially. Tall, straight, perfect for building ships and houses. In Canada, during the peak of the white pine boom, half the males in the country were employed as lumberjacks. Not 10%, not 20. Half. In the United States, the peak came in 1906, 500,000 lumberjacks. Here's what the job actually looked like. You worked dawn to dusk, 6 days a week, fall and winter only. You consumed 7,000 calories of food every day just to sustain the labor. Meal breaks? 10 to 15 minutes. Talking during meals was often prohibited. You ate, you worked, you slept. You lived in primitive shanties, flea-infested, poor hygiene, no running water. You wore bright colors, blue, green, red, yellow, not because it looked good, because you needed to see each other through the underbrush and warn when a tree was falling. The trees were cut with axes and 2-man crosscut saws, 1 man on each end, pulling in rhythm, back and forth, hour after hour. A single white pine could weigh 5 tons. If it fell wrong, it could kill you instantly. Once down, the logs were dragged to frozen rivers by horses. In spring, when the ice melted, the logs floated downstream to sawmills. You were paid by production, piecework. The more you cut, the more you earned.
And if you got hurt, you were on your own.
Even today, logging is the most dangerous job in America. 108 deaths per 100,000 workers, 30 times higher than the average. More dangerous than being a soldier during peacetime. But for all that, it was work, honest work, and for men who needed it, it was enough. 1926, Germany. A man named Andreas Stihl patented the first electric chainsaw. It weighed 140 pounds, required 2 men to operate, and needed to be plugged into a power source. Not exactly practical in the middle of a forest. 3 years later, Stihl developed the first gas-powered chainsaw. Still massive, still a 2-man operation. The lumberjacks hated it. Too heavy, too unreliable, broke down constantly. The 2-man crosscut saw was faster, cheaper, and didn't need fuel. For nearly 20 years, chainsaws sat on the sidelines. A curiosity, not a revolution. Then came World War II. The war accelerated innovation in small engines, lighter materials, better fuel systems, more reliable designs. And when the war ended, that technology came home to the forest. 1950, the first 1-man chainsaw. Still heavy, about 30 pounds, but 1 man could carry it. 1 man could operate it. 1959, the Stihl Contra, 26 pounds, 6 horsepower. This was the revolution. A tree that took 2 men an hour to fell with a crosscut saw, 1 man with a Contra could drop it in 10 minutes. Within a decade, the 2-man crosscut saw became obsolete. And the lumberjack? He started disappearing. Here's the thing about the chainsaw. It didn't replace lumberjacks overnight. The first models in the 1920s were too heavy. The 1930s models were unreliable. Even in the 1940s, most crews stuck with hand tools. But by the 1950s, chainsaws were everywhere. And they brought friends. Skidders replaced horses for dragging logs. Crawler tractors cleared paths. Feller bunchers, machines that could grab a tree, cut it, and stack it in one motion, started appearing in the 1960s. Transport trucks replaced the old river drives. Logs went straight from forest to mill on wheels. The logging camps started closing. Why house 100 men in the woods when a crew of 10 with machines could do the same work? By the 1960s and 70s, loggers commuted from home. The seasonal rhythm, winter work, summer farming, disappeared. The workforce shrank from 500,000 at the 1906 peak to just under 80,000 today, an 84% reduction. And those who remain? Concentrated in the Pacific Northwest, the South, and parts of the Northeast. Everywhere else, the profession is nearly extinct. The lumberjack wasn't just a job, it was a culture. Logging camps had their own songs, their own language, their own codes. Men lived together for months at a time, worked side by side, relied on each other for survival. The lumberjack became American folklore. Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox, tall tales told around campfires, a symbol of strength, independence, and the frontier spirit. But the modern logger, he drives a machine, sits in a climate-controlled cab with GPS and hydraulic controls. He works alone, doesn't need a partner, doesn't need a camp, doesn't need 50 men with axes. He's more productive, more efficient, safer, technically, but it's not the same. What was lost was the camaraderie, the physical skill, the tradition passed from father to son, the identity. There's a reason we still say lumberjack when we talk about the old days, and logger when we talk about today. They're not the same thing, and here's where the story gets darker. You'd think mechanization solved everything. Fewer workers, more productivity, higher profits. Except it didn't. In the last 2 years, almost 40% of logging operations downsized. 30% plan to exit the business within 5 years. Over 10,000 sawmill jobs disappeared in 2023 and 2024 alone. Sawmills are operating at just 64% capacity, despite strong demand for lumber. Western timber communities have lost 40% of their employment over the last 20 years. North Carolina lost 10,000 timber industry jobs in 2020 alone. And here's the real crisis. There's no one to replace the workers who remain. The Wall Street Journal ranked logger as the worst job in America. Dirty, dangerous, difficult. Young people don't want it. Can't blame them. So the industry is hollowing out. Small family operations are selling to large corporations. Rural towns that depended on logging are dying. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects another 2% decline in logging employment over the next decade. Not because the trees are gone, because the people are. If this story sounds familiar, it should. Lumberjacks, telephone operators, factory workers, bank tellers. The pattern is always the same. First, a machine is invented, then it gets better, then it gets cheaper, then jobs disappear. And the people doing those jobs, they adapt if they're young. They struggle if they're not. But here's what we forget. It's not just individual workers who suffer. It's entire communities. When a logging town loses its industry, it doesn't just lose jobs. It loses its identity, its economy, its future. The young people leave. The businesses close. The schools shrink. And what's left is a ghost of what used to be. The lumberjack didn't disappear because he couldn't do the job. He disappeared because a machine could do it faster.
What took 2 men an hour took 1 man 10 minutes.
What took a crew of 50 took 5. It took 40 years. From the first chainsaw in the 1920s to full mechanization in the 1960s. City by city, forest by forest, camp by camp. Until the thing that had employed 500,000 people was reduced to fewer than 80,000. Most of us never think about it. We buy lumber at Home Depot. We don't ask where it came from or who cut it, but they know. If this video made you think differently about the jobs that vanish, about the people and communities left behind, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about how ordinary things gradually changed. And leave a comment. What profession do you think will disappear next? Because it's happening right now to someone.
The lumberjack thought his job would last forever.
It didn't. Neither will yours.